Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Hybrid Network and another one of our discussions over the work of writer Stephen King, where, once again, I'm talking about the Dark Tower movie. Truth be told, I never imagined I'd be talking about the movie as much as I am, mostly because I didn't think it would be worth it. But I mean, the more my mind just kind of wanders, the more it returns to this movie that just didn't seem like it wanted to go out and do anything outside of the base minimum. But the real reason I wanted to come back to it was because the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized that I never really took the time to say how this film could have been done better. In all honesty, only listing negatives and problems without taking the time to be constructive, well, that just makes a review pointless. Because what's the point of just listening to the bad things that something has to offer without hearing about any way to really fix those problems? It just gives the impression that the movie is unredeemable and that no good could have come from it, which isn't really at all what I think about the Dark Tower movie. And this isn't coming from some expert on the series, because I'm sure all of you out there could present a million different things to counteract what I think could have been done. But ultimately, as a guy that likes movies, I just kind of wanted to present ideas that I think could have made this more enjoyable. Just to clarify, this isn't necessarily another review. I mean, you could, I guess, consider this a follow-up to the initial one that came out a few weeks ago. Like, just kind of go with it, because this really came to my mind after thinking about the movie for so long, and I just felt like it needed to be done. Also, I'm not really listing anything, because honestly, that just seems like too much organization for what should ultimately just be sparing thoughts on what I consider to be better narrative flow and resonance. Which might not even mean much, considering that I've never made a movie, and I honestly don't see myself making one anytime soon. But to be honest, that's never stopped me before from talking about this crap. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. So the main criticism I had with the movie was that it essentially doesn't give me any reason to get invested in the story, the characters, or the setting. The short version of this essentially being that the film doesn't really devote any time to set its own rules and parameters up. I don't know anything about Midworld, I don't know anything about the gunslingers, I don't know anything about Walter, his band of rodent dudes, and ultimately, I don't know anything about the Dark Tower itself. Now, while you could say that reading the books fills a lot of these gaps in, I don't think that's a valid argument for what is essentially just an adaptation. And yes, I know that this is technically a sequel to the books. That point is made abundantly clear with how often the production and fans have reiterated that. However, no matter how you slice it, it is reimagining and reinterpreting characters, settings, and narratives from the book series. So it counts as an adaptation in my book. So it kind of has to follow the rules of a new story, which essentially means that it has to be able to set up the world that's presenting in an engaging manner. In one of my videos talking about the Dark Tower, I compare it, perhaps a little unfairly, to Lord of the Rings, which does an incredible job at presenting a new world with new rules, lore, factions, and allows the viewer to understand the basic history of the land, so that we can understand the quest within the boundaries that are set up by the story. Lord of the Rings doesn't pause itself in order to rub this shit in our faces, but it does present itself in a way that allows the world to breathe and flourish, to introduce aspects of the world through experiences the Fellowship goes through and their own personal accounts for everything around them. So, in light of that comparison, I think what this movie really needed was some honest-to-God world building, and that it should have taken place almost entirely within Midworld. In the original story, Jake Chambers is sent into Midworld after he dies in his own reality, ending up in a new setting and following a new character. It's through the interaction and journey that these two take on, not to mention the side stories here and there, that we get a feel for what this new reality is like, and the feel for the way the various societies work in this new world. Contrary to what the movie would have you believe, Midworld is more than just vast deserts and people wearing dishcloths. There's all kinds of freakish creatures, doorways, and lost empires. It's something new to discover, so I think the movie could have benefited a lot from having it all take place within Midworld, so that it could slowly build up a new setting that we'd want to see more of and explore more of the rules and cultures that inhabit it. All the stuff with Jake having visions about the tower, the man in black, and Roland, I think that all works fine for that character because it gives him a look into this world, but his confusion would mirror ours. Jake is supposed to be the audience, reacting to these visions in a way that mirror our intrigue and a bit of our underlying fear. You can have him running from the canned toy and keep the sort of problems that he's having with his home life and social life, because this in turn mirrors real life and the escape that comes with Midworld. That way, his escape here feels like an escape for us, and his interest to learn more about this new land reflects back on us. As he learns, we learn. And it doesn't equate to any sort of exposition dump. Instead, it would equate to us learning along with someone else, making it feel as if the film isn't so much stopping itself to tell us some important fact, but rather that it's part of the narrative to inform this one character and further his own personal journey. Us getting more engrossed in Midworld would just be a happy coincidence. Seemingly anyway, and that's all you need sometimes. So, speaking on character growth and sprawling sagas, the biggest confusion that I had about The Dark Tower was just how close-ended it felt. The movie is a sequel to a journey that spanned multiple books and countless side stories, so the idea that the film itself ends in a way that seems like one story and plot are done just seems odd. If they wanted this to be a franchise, they should have left the main plot open enough to be continued through multiple adventures. It just seems like there wasn't a whole lot of faith in the idea that anyone would want to see a new epic, which obviously isn't the case, though in the face of how the film turned out, they could have been right. Again, I don't make movies, this stuff goes over my head, but the point I'm trying to make is that the growth of our protagonist shouldn't have to be completed in one journey, and then another complete arc happens in another film. It's all supposed to be one journey. So you'd think that what our characters go through, their trials and tribulations, would span multiple features and bring out one huge quest for identity that spans multiple installments. Now, I am of the firm belief that films should be able to stand on their own outside of a franchise, but that doesn't mean that these films need to have standalone stories. I mean, they do, but I mean that the personal story for characters shouldn't have to be open and closed in individual parts. It seems like a big moment for both Jake and Roland in the film is overall resolved by the end, and I don't think that really bodes well for creating appeal and intrigue and where these people can go next. Instead, I propose a means to both strengthen the idea of the beginning of an epic and promoting the idea of this being a sequel to past events. Subtly, of course. The idea of having Roland accept his role as a gunslinger I think is actually a pretty neat idea, because the character seems pretty resolute in this idea in previous books, desperate to reach the structure and prevent its destruction at the hands of the Man in Black. In the movie, the idea that our character has grown so cynical that all he cares about is revenge on one person gives us the opportunity to tell a story about responsibility and the preservation of hope. The tower is supposed to keep all of reality in check. It keeps stability. So the idea that Roland doesn't care that it falls means that he's let the proverbial tower holding up all of his previous conceived ideals and morals fall. And the entire subplot of Jake wanting him to care more about something outside of himself still works well to create a narrative that champions the idea of hope and working to be an inspiration to those around you. In my head, I'm imagining a scene that mirrors the first book in a very special way. Roland and Jake are making their way through the lair of the slow mutants, and Jake, through his own fear and unawareness, finds himself dangling from a cliff. Roland grabs the kid's hand, but Walter Paddock comes forward and tells the gunslinger that he won't run away anymore, that he'll give the gunslinger the retribution and vengeance he so desperately craved if he follows him. However, he's not going to wait for him to pull Jake up. He has to choose between his desire and the life of someone else. In the book, this is a powerful scene, because we see Roland's true nature play out early on, and we see how his mistakes haunt and compound upon his soul several times going forward. But in the movie, it's a different story, because this is a new trip through the wheel. Roland, having seen Midworld anew through the eyes of a foreigner, someone who can see the beauty in the people and the need for a beacon in this new land, gives Roland new purpose. This time, Roland sacrifices his own wants and helps someone outside of himself. This time, he saves Jake from falling. And while there's some lingering bitterness at first after having lost his chance at dispelling his own sense of justice, in a way it doesn't matter, because he's found a new reason to keep going. Walter doesn't matter so much anymore. The Dark Tower does, making sure that its structure can still give hope to a large endless stream of reality that needs something to look to and give them all the inspiration to keep moving on. This in turn sets up future challenges to his morals and new setup for a plot that can question the very idea of responsibility and the importance of hope, giving us a well of films to further explore and continue the growth of Roland, Jake, and any other comrades that join them on their quest. It's the perfect way to start a new journey to the Dark Tower. But that's what I just thought the movie needed, and what I thought honestly could have made it better. I'm actually interested in what you guys think could have done the job. Let me know in the comments, and thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Hybrid Network for future discussions on the Dark Tower and other Stephen King properties. This is Luke, and I'll catch you all next time.